Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the SOK podcast. I am a man known by many names, but around these parts I'm known as the Dwarf Forests, and I am joined by...
This is Pilot.
I'm Toa Lavorus.
And I am Toa Sparta.
Alright, gentlemen, today we have a very interesting and fun topic that should bring a lot of discussion and perhaps some controversy if you are into that stuff. So, today we talk about stuff that we don't really like in the Bionicle lore. So, I think the format here is that we each bring up one point and then we discuss it. So, anyone want to start?
Yes. A couple little gripes I have here and there are that I feel like some of the major characters, primarily the Shadowed One, not really getting a dedicated set. I understand he was a very popular combiner model and stuff like that, but to not just be able to go to a store and see boxes of, a set dedicated to him with, big old text of, Bionicle, and then down in the corner saying the Shadowed One. Another bit of a gripe I have, this attributes to a lot of later years, but the lack of combiners and Kaeda models and all that. Like, there have been combo models, but the idea is, my understanding is Altoa have the ability to form Kaeta and Nui, or I should say the entire Matoran species, and it's just like beyond 2002, that idea was canned.
Like, no mixing for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think in
Yeah,
terms
they should
of,
have at least given a...
Sorry, you go for us.
Yeah, they should have given like a lore reason for that not happening anymore. Like, maybe it could only happen in certain places or something, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there is a lore reason, which on the one hand I can't help but find weak, and that's apparently the fact that Makuta have the ability to defuse Kaeta, which is something I'm willing to just be like, yeah, no.
So, like, Toa would kind of just not bother with it at that point.
I mean, maybe that's I don't know. It doesn't. That's when I looked on wiki pages. That's all it said is the Makuta have the ability to disband, Kaeta fusions and stuff, and it's just like it never explains how.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against
the idea. Yeah,
that's
just lazy writing.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to the idea. It's just a matter of, there's at least explain the method as to how that works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of, like, the combo models, like, in later years kind of got a bit, I don't know, lazier as time went on. Like, some of them, I don't know. Because, like, didn't they just, like, kind of put out, like, a lot of combo models that just, like, didn't have any, like, lore or anything, like, associated with them?
It was just kind of like for the purpose of making sure that you could like put these two together to make something.
Yeah.
What is it?
It was kind of just like a feature of like the toys at that point. It wasn't anything that like added to like the world of Bionicle, really.
Well, that's yes and no. In fact, TTTV LJ, he did a fantastic, sub-series called Remix Review and stuff like that, where he made combo models for each of the years and stuff like that. And, there is a portion where he mentions, is the model canon or non-canon? And, without going too much on a tangent, but one thing he did mention about, doing those combiner models and stuff is, there have definitely been a fair share of combo models that were just like, oh, you have two Titans and you're only using like a combined 40 parts to make this little thing, like a little Rahi or something. So I definitely found that interesting.
Yeah, most of the like the canon combo models are like Rahi, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
At least like I feel like that's the case from what I've seen.
That definitely played more into a part. Like I believe it started in 06, because between 01 to 05, that's where a lot more canon character combos and all that took place. I mean, and of course in 01, given that Rahi were the main antagonists and all that, so there was definitely a lot of Rahi combiners that were canon, but at the same time, it's just like, well, that was the main antagonist. That's, that's to be expected.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense too, because you could take like both of like the Rocky you got in a set and combine them kind of in like to a bigger version of that Rocky, which I think is kind of neat, because then you have like the Toa, you can combine them to make like a bigger Toa. Kind of just makes sense.
Hashtag bring back Haida.
Yeah, it would have been cool if they had like a Kaita Nui, like a combo of like all 6 Toamata into like one like huge Toa thing.
I think they did.
Did they do that?
I think they did.
I don't think so.
It was canon. I think it was something like it was said that they could, but they never did, kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
I see. So there wasn't like an official combo model.
No, I don't think so. But I think it is stated like in the laws that technically speaking they could join together.
Yeah, because I know Matorn can do that.
Yeah.
Yes, the Mictorn Nui is canon, I believe.
Matoran Nui.
Yeah.
So scuffed. God. Right. Talk about Matora, and something I hate is them eating through their hands, because apparently someone at LEGO decided they've got mouths, but they're not going to put things in their mouths because that's disgusting and revolting, and they can't do that, so they just absorb stuff through their hands, and it's like, what?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Matoran, like, I'm pretty sure can, like, eat and drink like we do, but, like, they kind of just choose to, like, use, like, their hands or whatever for it.
It's because they find...
Maybe they have mouths in their hands.
Yeah.
Parasite. I think the actual explanation is that basically it's easier for them to process the nutrients and stuff out of it if they have just absorbed the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they technically get less nutrients from eating normally, or what's normal for us.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think it's stupid.
Yeah. It is kind of an odd thing. Like, Matoran, I think, have some kind of, odd, physiological stuff, like, when you kind of look at them closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's because when you think about it, why do creatures have mouths? It's to eat stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then you give these creatures mouths, and then they just absorb stuff through their hands. Well, then what's the point of a mouth there?
I guess talking or something? I don't know.
Well, no, because you get creatures that can emit noises without opening their mouths, like frogs. Frogs can emit noise, and they don't open their mouth to do that.
Yeah.
So
I guess
they use the mouths to keep their masks in place.
Yeah, there's that, but then also, I don't know. I think what would have made, more sense, maybe, is, to have, some sort of slot to, insert the mask, like what Forrest is talking about. And then, under that, you could have, a speaker or something, right? And that's, the, kind of, the voice box, if you will. And then you could have, the hand thing to, absorb the food.
There's a lot of things in Land that are just scuffed beyond reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
another thing about the Matoran and actually everyone in the Matoran universe is the fact that love supposedly isn't canon, which it's just the dumbest thing. It
kind of is, yeah, especially because they actually have depictions of love between Matoran and Toa, in the movies and Minog and stuff. You have the infamous example of Maku and Huki, and then there's that one line between Matau and Nokama in Bionicle 2. Mm-hmm. And it's how can you have that and say that love isn't a thing?
Yeah, it's how can you have a romantic joyride without no being romance? It's what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely was a weird one, but then again, welcome to, this seems like it hasn't changed in many years, but the idea is just we have no problem, glorifying some interesting and dark storylines, but God forbid we talk about romance and all that,
yeah.
I know
why.
Yeah, at least it's different in Ninjago.
I mean, well, something I find kind of interesting is studying stories and stuff. A lot of stories happen because of the romance of two characters, and they lead off into this trail of all these different things happening. Look at the story of Troy. I think the entire thing happened because Paris was promised Helen's hand by Aphrodite, and that's romance. It led to a lot of killing, but that was romance. Yeah, fucking... What was the next one? Romeo and Juliet. That's also a love story that happens that lots of people die for no reason.
They commit like suicide at the end, don't they?
They commit suicide at the end, and that's basically because they're not allowed to be together because their two families are going to war. So there's a whole of people that die in the in the background of that. Technically speaking, this is something people aren't ready to hear yet, but the first Star Wars, the only reason it actually happens is because Luke sees Leia and says, I'm going to help this hot chick out find this guy called Obi-Wan, who I've never heard of.
Yeah, and then it turns out to be...
no, he's got the point.
Sister.
But that's beyond the point. It starts off with that.
Yeah. Starts because Luke has the hots for his sister.
So there's a lot of relatively decent stories that come out. And they all involve romance and stuff, even if their focus isn't romance. And so, going and making this really long, lore-intensive series, and going, the one pivotal thing in our nature isn't present there, is stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's also an important distinction to make too between romantic love and platonic love. One thing that I wonder is if Matoran can have friendships or not, right? Because, if they aren't capable of, any kind of love, then, technically friendships wouldn't exist either, I don't think.
It would be exclusively a binary, do I help this person for what they're going to give me in return kind of thing. That seems kind of boring.
it's purely a robotic, mechanical thing for them to, help each other, if that was the case.
Yeah, and they insist that they're not robots because Bionicles are cyborgs, so therefore...
Yeah. Yeah, which, I don't think that's the case. I think when they say love isn't canon, they mean, romantic love. Because there are, so many cases of, characters in Bionicle having, friendships and, camaraderie between them and stuff. Mm-hmm. Just, the whole, idea of, a Toa team in general is kind of, founded on that principle. So...
Okay, but if romantic love was canon, would a romance between two members of the same Toa team be incest? They call themselves brothers and sisters.
That's true.
Now we're asking the real questions.
Yeah.
It's just a Star Wars story all over again, I swear.
see, here's the thing, right? I think love in itself should be a canon thing. I don't think that reproduction necessarily should be. Because for one, Matoran are primarily mechanical creatures, and that just wouldn't make that much sense. And also because do they have genitalia?
It's probably going to be a bit more along the lines of how it's done in Transformers. And we're gonna know the Transformers being Cybertrons and all that. They don't have the need to reproduce as humans do.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't stop them from having romantic relationships with another Cybertronian.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you can't have romance without sex. This is something that some people can't get over.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, and the way that New Matoran would come into existence is through something I don't know, the Red Star or something, right?
Well, they are built. It specifically state the Matoran are built with machines and stuff.
Right.
So, all right, these two are a
Hero
couple now.
factory.
They want to, these two are built. They want to build a Matoran, so they're gonna go have some interesting lone time in that machine over there.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess to add on to the whole Matoran thing and romantic love, one thing that I've always found very pointless about Bionicle is the gender restrictions for the different Matoran types. How Tamatoran are all male, Gamatoran are all female. And also the ratio of that to where there's a far greater amount of male Matoran types compared to female.
Yeah, I think there's 2, possibly 3.
Yeah, I think
female types.
There's Vomatoran are female, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have Cematoran and then Gamatoran.
So it'd be 3.
Yeah.
It's
And then I guess you kind of have Avmatoran too, because they're the only one that can be
Avmatoran
both.
and Chromatoran are the exclusion, because they're neutral. They can be whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both from, I don't know, I think for one, it's kind of less interesting to have them all just, a tribe of Tamatoran. I think it's kind of boring to have them all just be dudes, right? And also, from kind of a mocking character creation perspective, I think it's just very limiting because you know, like say someone wants to create like a, you know, like a Toa of Fire or like a Tamatoran that's like female, right? In order to do that and have that fit into canon, you kind of have to do something, you know, some like mental gymnastics to like make that like work, right? And yeah.
But I think it's a community consensus I think that's, you know, widely, you know, shared on the idea of that, you know, I've yet to see anyone really, you know, bat an eye on the idea of just, you know, just like, this must be kept and all that. Everyone seems to be fluent to the idea of just like, oh, here a female Tamatoran and all that. Here's a female Toa of Fire, and here's a, you know, here a male Gamatoran. Here's, you know, a male Toa of Water and stuff like that.
Because the community has sense in this regard.
Yes.
So, like, don't get me wrong, it's still a significant lore gripe, but I think it's one that the community just, you know, definitely is just like, we'll take care of this one.
Yeah, like when it comes to like the mocking side of it, I think people kind of just choose to ignore it. I know that's the case with me at least, but yeah, and I think some of like the reasoning for like why certain Matoran types are like the way they are is kind of stupid too. Like the whole reason that like Matoran of like psionics, for instance, right, or like female, it was because of like the whole thing with like Orty being like too angry or whatever. So like they made them female to like make them more calm, supposedly.
I'm not sure about you guys, but have you ever seen an angry woman? Gee.
I think it'd be best not to get into that.
Podcast.
Alright, and then since Glatorian can be both genders, no matter the color, it's kind of a wasted opportunity that they still made. The only female set they made was still the blue one.
Yeah, that's true.
This is true.
And they had even like less female characters technically, because like, you know, like they made like Barracks like a dude too, right? So
no, I think Kina was literally the only female character we got. Like the whole Baron
I think so. Now that I think about it.
Yes. The only female character from 09, Kina.
Yeah.
God, I just thought like the Stars line didn't have female characters at all.
Yeah.
Nope. That's true. There was supposed to be Nektan.
Whenever I hear the name Nektan,
I mean, Rakshi could like technically be a female.
Redneck Nektan.
Yeah.
I can't let that Toa there get that there golden armor. I gotta go over there and stop him. I'm gonna go whack him with this weird side of mine.
If Bionicle Anki or whatever he's called these days, if he's to be believed, then the yellow Rakshi is female.
I think that's just him projecting some weird fantasies, to be honest. like, I'm sorry, but that's just what it sounds like to me, bro. Right, you know what else I think is a bit stupid? Is some of the naming conventions that we had. Like, you had this really cool story from Makuta being this, like, force of nature. He's like, he's everywhere because he's the shadow and all that. And then they just called him Terry.
Yeah. Kind of a letdown.
I actually hate...
It's pretty letdown if you ask me.
I already hated the fact that they made him not a force of nature. But if they are gonna make him a guy, at least give him a cool name.
Yeah.
But, I mean, like Pterodax is cool, but it sounds like they could have given him something cooler. It was not. They had having all the chance and all the time to thinking up the proper name, because they only named him like 06 or 07 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem isn't like the name in itself. Like, I think Pterodax is actually a pretty decent name, like in a vacuum. I think the problem is that, like, you know, taking like Pterodax and like comparing that to like the like legacy and like mystique of the Makuta, right?
It's
kind of
Makuta.
Yeah. It just
because they called him Pterodax just so that they could have other Makuta in the story.
Right. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What if we kind of did a reversal? So instead of Makuta being dubbed as the species, I know this is going to sound weird to wrap their mind around, but the idea is like, okay, So Makuta keeps his name of Makuta, but he is of the pterodax species. Like, to me, that would have made more sense. You know, Makuta still would have been Makuta, then there would be, you know, again, I'm going to, you know, for the context of this point, the idea is, yes, I'm going to refer to the Makuta species as pterodax. But the idea is like, oh, there are other pterodax out there. But the idea is the one we've known so far is named Makuta. Like, I think that would have been a better handling of the whole thing.
I'm not gonna lie, that
okay, but maybe not have it.
It sounds
what
better.
What if we don't have any? Yep. Sorry. Say what you were gonna say.
Oh, okay. Well, it sounds better, but like I still don't really like the idea of him like just being a guy. Like I feel like for someone to like take over the universe, there has to be kind of like more to them in a way.
Yep.
Than just some bloke.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, I personally wouldn't even have the other Makuta or have them be pterodax or whatever. I would not have the other Makuta, who wouldn't be Makuta, be like Makuta's followers, like maybe corrupt Toa or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea.
It's, like, that's true, because, like, Mask of Light and actually even Metro Nui, Legends of Metro Nui, they did a good job of, you know, showcasing Makuta, you know, both as the physical threat, but also still having a lot of supernatural effect to him and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like how we always just see like his shadow eyes for a very long time. And then even then, his mechanical form we see at the end of the movie, and by proxy his O3 set, he's a Titan, you know, he's big bad. Like he towers over Toa just as he should.
Just for him to get cripped by moons, like
gets bonked by moon.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't know if we actually kind of building on that, where you know Makuta Pterodax's plan of taking over the Matorn universe. Didn't they say like it was like it took place over what wasn't it like 100,000 years? But yeah, at the same time, if it was just like once you know O1 started, it felt like there was no rest period in between. So where it's
right.
like, yeah, Makuta's plan takes 100,000 years. But the idea is we only see, for lack of a better term, maybe at most a decade of it. You know, It seems like from 01 was the last decade of the 100,000 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I think it's like how I understand it is like the entire like Bionicle timeline takes place over like 100,000 years, right? I believe where Pterodax's plan first comes up is around like 80,000 years ago, which I believe is like when like the Baraki first get like imprisoned, right? For you know like when they try to like overthrow Madanui.
Mm-hmm.
And like since then is like when Makuta was trying to like do his whole like plan and everything. And yeah, and then like you have like the Great Cataclysm that happens, right? In like, you know, 2004. That happens like between that and like 2001 there's like a 1,000-year gap, right? And then what's weird is that everything that takes place after that 1,000-year gap, like everything from like, you know, 2001, 2003, and then like the Ignition trilogy, right? So like 06 to 08, all of that takes place within the span of like a year. Which makes like no sense to me. Because like what was going on in that like 1,000-year gap between like Metro Nui and Madanui? You know?
What like one Matoran gained sentience and discovered what they were, and he was having like talk with Lego, and then basically was like, "All right, boys, we've got 1 year to sort out the story. Go." That's probably what happened.
Yeah, like the whole Bionicle timeline, I feel like is just very wonky, and like how it's set up. Like
I mean, time skips.
Or sorry, you go, Sparta.
Time skips can work, but again, it's like we're saying, the idea is just like, you know, when you're talking to the scale of 100,000 years and all that, and you know, here we are saying we're talking about a period of only like 20,000 of those years at most, and all that. It's just, it's to me, it's just like if you're gonna have access to that much of a timeline, make the most out of it. You know,
right? Yeah,
so time skips work, like you know, like. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure does a good job with time skips in between parts, and
actually,
Go ahead, Toph.
Yeah, actually, regarding JoJo, the short time period where everything happens, like in the main Bionicle story, it kind of reminds me of JoJo Part 5, because doesn't that happen in like a week?
I mean, I don't know. You're
takes, like-
you're the JoJo expert.
Yeah.
You should tell us.
Yeah, it takes it takes a week for Giorno to go from a student to the leader of the Italian mafia.
I'm not 100%
That's a big
sure it's just
transition.
a straight... Yeah, I'm not sure 100% sure it's just a straight week, but the idea is, it's still...
It's like 8 days or something.
Yeah, it's still quick. Like, I'm gonna say at most a month and all that. So... But then again, there are definitely a number of, parts in JoJo where it's like that, the entire story in of itself wraps up fairly quick. Like, I think it's, like, part 4, part 8... What else? I think even part 7, does have a lot of spacing out and stuff like that. But like part 3, that was, I think, at most like a month as well, just because again they were racing
do like
against
40
time.
days or something.
Yeah, something like that. But again, just this whole talk of timelines and stuff like that. Like even another series I enjoy, Devil May Cry. Like between game entries, they do their best to like. Not to be, crystal clear, but definitely give a good impression on the idea. Like time has elapsed. Like technically, the first game in in the timeline, the first game is 3. Well, Dante's in his late teenage years, and then Devil May Cry 1. Okay, he's in his mid to upper 20s, and then the second game, as weirdly abysmal as that one got a small retcon saying he's more in his mid or upper 30s, but then Devil May Cry 4 came around, and then by proxy Devil May Cry 5, and they're like, yeah, Dante's in his early to mid 40s now and stuff like that. And they did a good job, just demonstrating it just by his physical appearance and all that, how he grew, as he got older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Halo is kind of like that too, because like, the original trilogy of like Halo games, right, kind of focuses on like the whole like human covenant war. And like despite that, it like takes place at like the very like end of it, like the last like year or so. Whereas
I think between Halo 1 and Halo 3 it's like a total of like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Time frame.
Yeah, and like
running that stuff.
Yeah, and like at the same time we have like this like 30-year like history of like the war that like took place like before that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, it feels like there's like a lot of like all of like the major events have been like condensed to like this one point in the timeline,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like for Bionicle, it's, I don't know, it's weird because like we've like throughout like the course of like the main story, we can kind of see like all that like can take place in like a year in like the Bionicle timeline, right? Which kind of like confuses me because like there's all these like hundreds of thousands of years of like the history of like the Matoran universe, right? And it seems like compared to that, right, there's like so little that like went on, and yeah, it just confuses me.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely very true. Vakama takes point on everything after, the Cataclysm and all that, getting the Matoran and Nata Nui and stuff like that. 'Cause again, it's one of those things that isn't exactly the clearest and all that, but it's like, because didn't technically the 05 sub-story of like, where like the Shadow one got a lot more involved in all that, like,
Mm-hmm.
Vakama and then the Toa Metru, they were still Toa. And,
yes,
it's like they confronted Terry, they confronted the Dark Hunters and all that during the excursion. Like, actually, I believe it was after the 05 story. So the idea is they were the Hordika, they got cured as they were, carting the Matoran. And then it's like, while they kept doing it, they came back. And then it was, it was the Dark Hunters led by Shadow One versus Pterodax and all that, and his Rakshi army and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the book is called because I know it's portrayed in the book.
Time Trap.
Yes, I believe you are correct on that front. Speaking of Vakama and stuff like that and Toa teams, Lego, why was it that Toa Fire was always team leader? like even in like 07 and all that, a year underwater. They made Holly the poster child, and yet, they didn't let her take the reins as a leader for that excursion. It was still, Jawler leading the Tolomari.
Yeah.
For
Jawler,
I think
at
it's just
least,
because that
it makes a bit of sense, because, like, Jawler is, like, kind of the captain of the guard and stuff, right? I think it kind of makes sense, like, for his character, for him to be, like, the leader. But, yeah.
Yes, but on the other hand, it's still a case where, like, even if you just watch the movies in of itself, you can't help but definitely agree that Holly would definitely, make a lot of sense. And the idea is, again, since we're going to be underwater in 07, that, for lack of a better term, that, Jawler's like, Holly, call the shots. Water is your element, and, you help us. Like, sure, we've been mutated to adapt to deep sea, but we're still in your element.
Hmm.
I mean, no, I need to set things on fire because of, like, I'm terrified, and therefore I must learn to control my fire abilities on the water. It's like, bro.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that I feel like, again, the community itself has done a fairly decent job of just being like, they respect it, but on the other hand, they're just going to be like, we'll expand on that, no questions asked.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's still one of those things that every once in a while I wish could have been a little more diversified.
Yeah, I think
it's just because...
Or you go first.
Yeah, I just think it's because the kids like the red ones.
That could be it.
There's not really...
It's like a marketing thing. Because, like, the red and green figures were always, like, the most popular ones, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
But I can't help but feel like by that point there was a lot of influence, because wasn't it 06 when they changed the color scheme for Toa of Earth, primarily?
Toa of Stone. Yeah.
I mean, it was like 04 when they first changed it, because they changed it from brown to, like, the nougat kind of color.
I mean, it was still brown, though, is the thing. It was just kind of a darker shade.
It wasn't even dark, it was just different.
Right. I guess. But I mean, like 06 was where they, like, really went, like, crazy with it, though, because, like, there wasn't even a shade of brown anymore. It was, like, yellow now. And then they did, like, orange in 08 with Bohatu.
No, it was originally with the Nika gunmetal instead of brown.
Yep.
Yeah, but Huki had, like, yellow on him, too. He was like, yellow and gunmetal, I believe.
He was more gunmetal than yellow, though.
True.
Yeah, he had the Keat orange and all that. He had the same shade of yellow and stuff as Kitongu. But to that point, it's just one of those things where, again, we're talking by like 2006. Well, by that point, granted this is only the third Toa team, but the idea is the, like, 5th round of Toa sets and all that.
Yeah.
So I can't help but feel like every once in a while, other characters should have gotten the spotlight. Like, I'm not trying to say that it wouldn't have changed the color scheme and all that for Toas of Stone, but the idea is, like, like 01, we had Tahu taking point, and then say, like, by the time they became Toa Nuva, then at that point it's like, let's just say Kopaka gets, the leader spotlight and stuff like that. 03, okay, we can go to, say, like, Whenua or something, and just, like, just letting each element have, like, the spotlight and all that for group shots.
Yeah, I think especially for, like, the Metro, it would have made more sense to have a different character be the leader instead of Vakama. Like, having, I don't know.
Vakama.
Like, Vakama, I think, just, I don't know.
Like
he just doesn't really have, like, that leader quality to him, I feel like.
God, this feels weird to talk about, but it's like, on the one hand, they did a great character arc and stuff for Vakama.
Yeah,
and all that, but the idea is right out of the gate, not having him be the leader and stuff like that is fine. But then again, with all the marketing and stuff, I guess I should approach it more from a marketing angle and not from a story angle. The idea is that, even we're talking about lore gripes, but still, just the idea that there should have been group shots, where it's just like, oh, it's not the Toa of Fire front and center and all that all the time. Let's have, every once in a while, like, let's have the Toa of Earth, let's have the Toa of Stone, Toa of Water, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I think a lot of, like, Vakama's story was, like, about him kind of, like, I don't know, finding himself a bit, right? So like I don't think it really made sense for him to like almost be like assumed to be the leader like right out of the gate. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Right.
that almost kind of feels like it's the case sometimes, right? It's like it's almost like always assumed that like the Toe of Fire is like the leader of the team, you know? Like I don't think in like Legends of Metra Nui they like properly like pronounce like, you know, you are the leader of our Toa team type thing. But Kama kind of
Right.
just
Yeah.
like assumes
Takes
that
a role.
position. Yeah.
Just got dibs.
Not even that. I mean, on the one hand, they kind of struggled to start working together first and all that.
True.
But then again, I think another big part of that, you know, why eventually it was like the story could still be focused on Vakama, but the idea is like I think half the reason why he was, you know, eventually, you know, once he gained his confidence, then was chosen to be team leader. As part of it was definitely him being a big Lecon fanboy.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of Lecon, like, this isn't limited to just, like, the Toa teams and, like, the main story. Like, you even have, like, Toa teams in kind of the, like, I guess, like, expanded lore that are, you know, follow this same, like, rule, too. Because you have, like, the Mangai, obviously, led by Lacan. And then you also have the Haga, led by Norik. And it's, like, that's like, what, like, 5 Toa teams now that are led by a Toa of Fire.
Yeah, they
Correct.
probably went ahead and had like Lesovic's team, and then they kind of like died. So like, all right, no Toa Varus leaders anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, I was about to ask that about Lesovic, because I could swear at one point they said he was the leader of the Toa team, and that's half the reason why he spiraled as bad as he did.
Yeah, he is. Or he was the leader of the Kordak until they were, you know, massacred, obviously.
Yeah, and so they
Right.
said, all right, well, this is a waste of like resources making Toa teams, so no more Toa Air as leaders. And then Toa appoints Liwa as leader for the Fantokas. They go split off into their 2 teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, you know, you kind of mentioned that, like, Leiwa being, like, the leader of, like, the Fantoka. That's kind of a nice, like, divergence from it, I think. You know? Like, I feel like if they had stuff like that more often, that would have been very, like, refreshing. So I think kind of having, like, that same, like, team dynamic being, like, copied, like, over, like, each Toa team we saw just, like, made it very repetitive.
Right.
You know? Both from, like, a story perspective and from kind of a set perspective, too.
But I feel like at that point, that was kind of like what I was just talking about earlier with the Mari and stuff like that. Again, you know, Fantoka, they were in the air. Well, Lee was bread and butter.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, you see,
So-
Tahu isn't a bit of an idiot. He knows how to lead his team. He's like, all right, we're going to get the Toa of Air to deal with the air situation, and then I'll go with the Toa of Water to the swamp, but I'll still remain in charge.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of get the spirit Tahu, but, you know. Kind of.
Right. I don't know. That's a point that the community, I think, has just done a good job and just, you know, respectfully respect it, but on the other hand, just be like, and we'll take things into our own hands now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, I think, too, like, in addition to having, like, a greater variety of, like, you know, Toa elements as, like, leaders, I think, too, like, a lot of people's, like, custom Toa teams will have, like, a much, like, wider variety of, like, elements, too. Because that's kind of another gripe I have, is, like, every major Toa team was always, like, the 6 primary elements. They never, like, introduced any of, like, the new ones to the story or anything, right? Like, I think it would have been really cool to have, like, a Toa of Lightning or, like, Toa of Plant Life be, like, center stage in the story. And instead, they've kind of been, you know, limited to just, like, you know, kind of just, like, existing in the lore. Yeah. Like, some elements, like, straight up just, like, don't have, like, you know, any, like, named characters associated with them, I don't think. Right?
Gravity.
Yeah, Gravity and Plant Life, I think, are the 2. And, yeah, as a Plant Life lover myself, I'm very sad by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one thing, this is, I don't know if I want to see if I can bridge a lot of these points together and all that, like one of the first ones I brought up and stuff like that, but, and maybe another reason was the fact that, you know, since Bionicle G1 was ended so abruptly, but the idea is that the great beings, like when we got to the point where we're like, okay, we're getting to the point where we're understanding the origins of the universe, and they're just smart Clitorian. not
Yeah, I hate that.
anything outside of, not some godlike being that we were expecting to be like, what's above Madanui? What's above the Great Spear Robot? Oh, just
Some more
Latorian.
chums, some more blokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I disagree with that. I think it's cooler that what are basically men, just regular people, build this godlike machine. I just think it's more interesting that way.
Like, don't get me wrong. On the one hand, I like, the ideas, it definitely builds on the idea of, smart goes a long way, but there's still a supernatural element that it's just like, then to have them built by, non-supernatural folks, basically. So the great beings being just smart Glatorian. Now, granted, they do a good job, saying like, they were so smart they made technology that made it seem like they had supernatural powers. But, which again, we're talking about Lego and a lot of machine-based stuff, so, maybe I'm using supernatural here in the wrong capacity, but still. It's one of those things that to me, felt definitely anticlimactic and all that in that respect. But on the other hand, it's, I don't know. It's one of the things I'm definitely torn on. Like,
Yeah.
I like it for the simplicity because of the fact that it definitely, I feel like, grounds it back down to where it's just like, this fantastical world made by regular people. And I feel like that was Lego's attempt to bridge it to be like, by proxy, trying to address us as the audience, like us as the great beings kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
One of the earlier ideas for Bionicle, like before it even released, I think, was that the Great Spirit Robot was like a lifeboat for a civilization. So I think it stems from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the problem, like, the problem isn't so much like the idea in itself of like the great beings just being Glatorian. I think the problem is like they got kind of like overhyped a bit. Like they're kind of built up as this like big thing, and then like, for them to like just be Glatorian was somewhat of like a letdown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think there shouldn't have been a separation between the great beings and the Glatorian. So it should have been like the scientists of the same civilization building like a thing to save the planet. I think that's a good story.
Yeah, I like that idea.
But no, they just had to go be some weird, like, wizard dudes that turned out to not be wizards.
Yeah.
Bonies.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, I feel like there have definitely been a fair share of creators over the years that do a great job, giving some good interpretations. Like, they make the great beings, they restore the hype by making them, respective godlike beings. Like, WCP does a great job with it, I think. He, like, granted, he's made Titan-sized great beings, but then he's also made more regular-sized great beings for, at least, for, like, mocks and stuff like that. And, there have been other creators that have done the same, like, Shade's got a couple of them. So, and I know you do as well, Pilot, so it's one of those things that, again, I think the community has done, they've done a good job, just being like, okay, well, we can kind of take this little element into our own hands.
Yeah, like the Great Beings are kind of one of those, like, I don't know, sort of like unexplored areas of Bionicle canon, which I think is kind of cool in a way because you can, you can kind of get more creative with it, I guess.
Right.
It's left up to interpretation, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. But
yeah, another reason why I like the Great Beings being just regular people is that, unlike if they were gods, them just being people makes the Bionicle universe not be the center of the entire universe, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, somewhere out there, all this could be happening.
Yeah, like it kind of enhances like the scope of the story.
Yeah. Because like the Mataran universe is the fantasy setting, essentially. Then Spheres Magna could be us in the future, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If so, then I like this future.
It's better than Warhammer, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, aside from the whole like shattering thing, like Spherus Magnus seems like a pretty decent place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, compared to Warhammer, even after shattering, it's still a pretty decent place.
Like the closest comparison they make to, pop culture references about, when it's Barra Magna is, just like, oh, it's more Mad Maxian, which, but even then it's a more tame version of Mad Max and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Mad Max is just Australia, so,
Barra Magnus would have just been a dune. There should have been giant worms everywhere.
That would have been cool.
But yeah, I think that's just about it for our points. We are kind of running out of time here. I think we are a bit over time, so let's go to the conclusion. So, let's keep this short. Why do we still love Bionicle, even with its flaws?
I mean, I still, love Bionicle even with all its flaws, just because, it's still this massive, expansive world that has a lot in it, and, for as much as, a lot of people like to have things spelled out and everything, there's still plenty of room to play and for us to be creative. I mean, again, it's a Lego franchise after all, so, if you're not building something yourself, then, like, that's the whole point of Lego, being able to build stuff and make your own stories and that. So, that's still one of the main reasons why I still love Bionicle to this day. It's just, as rigid as the story is, there's still enough, loose elements for me to be creative about it.
For me personally, the reason that I still love Bionicle is it's more the general vibe, especially of the early years. Like the mystery, these robot people being in this natural setting. It just has that vibe,
Yeah, I think
and
I'm
also
kinda... Sorry, you go for us.
Yeah, and even if I'm not a big fan of all the lore, and I don't necessarily follow it in all my fan stories, it still has the roots in there, and it's just great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of similar. Like for me, it's mostly like kind of the like what kind of like gets me is like the central like concept of Bionicle. Like that's always been very like captivating to me. And what's kind of kept me going, like this whole time is like kind of that ability both to like, create both your own characters like in that universe, but also kind of like, think of different ideas of like, your own headcanon and stuff. Sort of like, I don't know, just like thinking of like stories and characters like within the guise of like that universe, I think for me is just very like, I don't know, fun to do. And that's kind of what has kept me engaged despite like the flaws that it might have.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Completely agree.
Like, how else are we going to make a cool-ass animated comic if we couldn't make our own stories using a particular defunct Lego toy?
Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add, or is this the end?
I mean, we were talking about maybe doing a part 2 to this eventually, like as a potential thing, because I think we covered quite a bit in this podcast, but there is still more Bionicle lore gripes we could bring up. Maybe if you guys want to in the comment section, you can even suggest some too if you'd like. But
I have a long list of things I don't like about Bionicle lore. We didn't even scratch the surface here.
Yeah, this is like the tip of the iceberg.
If you want more, there definitely is more.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we could definitely do another one of these.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, with all said and done, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more content. And that we were the Scholars of Kiora. Signing off.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.